U.S. involvement in the Jeffrey Epstein case by Bella Rickey. My first slide is about Trump's friendship with Epstein. So originally, Jeffrey and Trump were very close at one point. They went out together, they hung out, they often partied together because Jeffrey Epstein threw many glamorous parties that Trump was always out at, and both of their wives were friends as well. However, when Epstein was convicted with soliciting a prostitute and soliciting a minor, Trump had made claims to have stopped being friends with him and they were nothing but more acquaintances. They would say hi to each other if they saw each other out, but Trump didn't go to his parties anymore and they did not hang out as friends like they originally did. However, a little bit later, in a 2002 interview, Trump contradicted himself by saying that Epstein was a terrific guy and that he and him had remained friends and they still hung out on a personal level. So, although this was not proven, Trump had contradicted himself, leading people to suspect that he was merely saying him and Epstein's friendship had ended for the public eye because he knew what Jeffrey Epstein was getting into and the turmoil he was in, but in reality, they were still friends and still hung out together. Trump also had his own accusations against him that you could say were similar to Jeffrey Epstein's. Around the 2016 presidential election, a young woman had come forward and said that Trump had sexually assaulted her and touched her inappropriately without her consent at one of Epstein's famous parties. So once again, this just continues to contradict that Trump had stopped going to his parties and that they were no longer friends. But this also was one of the first times that Trump was getting a sexual assault allegation. Not the very first time, but one of the bigger ones, because this was when he was running for president and it had made it into trial. It ended up not being deemed true due to lack of evidence, but that does happen, many times. There's not always evidence of something happening, but that does not mean that it didn't happen. And then something else that, is pretty fishy is that Alex Acosta was the U.S. attorney responsible for Epstein's trial, and he gave Epstein a very lenient trial and gave him the least harshest punishment. So Epstein could have gone to jail for way longer than he did, possibly even the death sentence, but he did not get any of this. He got the easiest trial he could have gotten and the easiest sentencing he could have gotten. Later, it ended up turning out that this man, Alex Acosta, was Trump's friend and ended up being on Trump's board when he became president. So this caused speculation leading that Trump had something to do with Epstein getting such a light sentencing because the man who dealt with the sentencing was Trump's friend. So it just is kind of fishy. How this makes the U.S. look. So the U.S. is already looked down upon due to our president and the decisions he makes and the way he acts, especially recently with everything that's going on with racial segregation, women's rights. The U.S. is already looked down. And then this just kind of adds to the fire that our president is not only friends with one of the biggest sexual rapists out there, but that he also has his own allegations against him. Since Trump took office, America's reputation has declined every single year. So when Obama was president, a little over 4 years ago, we had good relations with other countries. We weren't a laughingstock. We weren't embarrassing. Ever since Trump has took office, major countries like all of Europe, Asia has started to look down upon us and think we are almost a mockery because our president is close friends with a rapist and someone who was sentenced to jail and hung out with him, and there's pictures posted of him and Epstein together. And in this past year alone, America's reputation has declined greater than any other year before. So not only has been going down every year, but when this past recent year, it's gone down even more and the most it ever has. I think this is due to other things going on, but I also think that this is due to the fact of his relations to Jeffrey Epstein. How this makes us look continued. So I decided to put some quotes down about what other major leaders in other countries has said about the US. The first one is, I feel sorry for Americans, said Yu Mint U, a member of parliament in Myanmar. But we can't help the US because we are a very small country. So this is basically her expressing how she just feels so sorry for us, and if that she had the power, or her country had the power to help, they would come over and help the people of the US, but unfortunately they can't. Another quote is, personally, it's like watching the decline of the Roman Empire, said Mike Bradley, the mayor of Sarnia. So, we're being put in relations to empires or other countries just falling into decline, falling into despair. That is what the US is now being related to due to our leader and his many accusations and many things he's done, but one of them being his relations with the Jeffrey Epstein cases. The last one I put, just a kind of a little bit of a fact, is a Pew Research Center poll of 13 countries found that over the past year, nations including Canada, Japan, Australia, and Germany have been viewing the United States in its most negative light in years. So this is kind of in relations to what I had said earlier. Every single year that Trump has been president, our relation and the way people look at us has gone down, but in this last year, it's gone down even more. When the Jeffrey Epstein cases came to light as much as they did within this past year, which also is when the country has taken its greatest decline, so much information about Trump's relations to this came out, and we learned how close they were, all the parties he went to, and then we learned about what was happening at those parties and how Trump was at those parties, which leads you to suspect if he was friends with the man who was doing this, they were hanging out at these parties. What was Trump doing? And then, like I said, there was a trial where a woman had came forward and said, at this party, Trump had sexually assaulted me. So these are things that people are learning, not just in the US, but in the entire world. And when all of this came out this year, it just, like I said, we were going down every single year, but this year was by far the worst in the decline of how other countries look at us. In conclusion, President Trump's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein has ruined America's reputation and the way other countries look at us. People look at our leader and relate him to sexual assault allegations towards young children. These women were not even 18. Regardless, sexual assault is wrong, but the fact that these girls they were little girls. Some of them were in high school, some of them weren't even in high school, and that's terrible. It also makes the people of the US look bad. Trump is America's leader, so when he looks bad, it makes the whole country look bad. But I think something else that's worse and something else that makes our country look bad is that we, as the people, voted this man into office. So the things that we knew about him, we still voted him into office. And then all of this came out within this past year about his relations with Jeffrey Epstein and everything that happened. And yet people have still been voting for him, rallying for him, all of that. And I just think it speaks a lot that, not only, yes, President Trump is not a good person, but we still voted him into office and are almost making his actions seem like they're okay when they're really not. And lastly, friendships and relations with other countries have been soiled because they do not want to relate to us. So countries that we were once considered allies do not really want to be our allies anymore. They don't really want to socially relate to us, because I think that if another country is friends with us, it then makes that country seem as if they are making sexual assault allegations and rape and being friends with rapists okay. Anytime that you're friends with the United States, friends with President Trump, that's basically almost what you're saying. So I think that his relations with the Jeffrey Epstein cases and the man himself has just completely soiled America's reputations in the eyes of other countries. And these are my references. Thank you.